Right, in this video, we are going to look at how to add a user in MySQL. So let's scroll down. I am in my Start menu, and I'm going through my programs. Here's my MySQL programs. I want to start my MySQL Workbench, which is my GUI interface for managing MySQL servers. The other thing I could do is just type MySQL down here, and it usually pops up as your first choice or your best match. So I'm going to start my SQL server. I've reduced my browser, my resolution on my monitor to try and make things a little bit bigger and easier to see in the videos. And you can see when I start up my SQL Workbench, I have an area down here that keeps track of my SQL connections. And the thing to remember about MySQL Workbench is it's a management tool for any SQL server we can connect to anywhere in the world. In this particular case, we're going to connect to the local instance that we installed on our computers. But I could add another connection here to another SQL server somewhere else, somewhere on my network, somewhere on somebody else's network. But we're going to be sticking with the one installed on our own computer. So I'm going to click on that, and it's going to ask me for my password, my root password, which we had set to SQL1234. And over here, I can see my databases that are installed. We have our system database. We have the sample Sakila database and the sample world database. So let's just go tables, city. It has some columns in it, ID, name, and country code. Let's just do a select over here. We have a query window. So let's do, actually, Sakila is marked as our default. I'm going to right click on world and set it as the default schema right now. So you can see it got bold there. And I'm just going to do a select star from the city table, and to see if it works. Here's our execute button. And there we can see all the different cities, and there's a ton of them. I can't remember how many, thousands, maybe 1,000. This selected the first 1,000, maybe there's probably more than that. Because we had it limited to 1,000 rows up here. So it gave me the first 1,000. I can say don't limit and we'd get them all, but we're okay. We know our database connection is working. That isn't what this video is really about, but I thought we'd show that it's up and running. We want to add a user. So let's go up to server and go to users and privileges. And we're going to add a new user. It is not a good idea. I kind of warned before about using the root password for everything. And especially in an application, you don't want to use your root user. Somebody can go through your application. I know it's compiled, but there's decompilers and things out there. You don't want to use your default, your root account for everything. So we're going to make another account that we're going to use. And I want you to make your account exactly this way, because when you do your project, I am going to try and run it on my computer, and I want your username and password to match my username and password, so I don't have to go through a bunch of things. Actually, I won't go through a bunch of things. If you don't make it match, your program's not going to run, because I'm going to test it on my SQL server on my computer. So things need to match up. So let's go to add account. And I am going to do a user, and I'm just going to call it test user. Password 1234. I know it's a weak password. We're doing this as a sample. In a classroom environment, we would never do this on a production server. Let's go ahead and hit apply. It's going to warn us, hey, consider using a better password, but we're going to go ahead and use that. Now that we have our user added, we can come over here, we can set things about our user. What roles do we want to have this user do? Now we can limit the user to certain databases using schema privileges. We can limit it to certain data administrative roles. Like if I click DBA, it's basically, in this case, making an account that has access to everything on our server, kind of like the root, okay? And we're going to use that for this classroom experiment. I don't want to use root because it teaches people bad habits. But in reality, for your application, you would set up the user. You'd limit the user to only the database things that it needs access to in the screen. And you would limit the roles that that user has. So if this is a user that just needs to read things from the database, you would go through and you would only give them permissions to do select statements on a certain database or even certain tables within a certain database. That's be more part of your database administration course. So in this case, just check the DBA button. We're basically making another user that has root access, but it's not going to be the root account. I just wanted to show you where those things were, and we will use this test user with a password of 1234 for the applications that we're going to be making in the upcoming videos. And it's the user you should use when you do your lab assignments. That user with the password 1234.